Hi, I'm Keith with Danfoss Food Retail Controls, and today's video will be on replacing a case controller. This will include both programming and wiring.
Thanks, Keith. We'll specifically be focusing on models AKCC 210, 525, and 550A in this video. So the first thing we needed to do when we're replacing the case controller is get two pieces of information out of the old unit, specifically the application and the address. These are two things we'll have to put into the new unit when they're initially installed. So to get this information at the case controller, we'll go ahead and hold in the top button on the display for about 5 seconds. Once we see R01, we'll know we're in the parameter menu. We can then use the top or bottom buttons to scroll through our parameters. And we'll go to parameter 003 first, which is our address. Once we get to that parameter, we'll hit our set button here in the middle. And we'll just want to note down the address that we have. Once we get that, we'll hit our set button again, and then we need to scroll down to parameter 061. This again is our application, which defines the functions of the relays on the controller. We'll hit set here, and again, we'll note down the application that we're using. Now, if the controller is completely dead, and that's the reason we're replacing it, you have no display, the alternative to getting this information from here would be back at the System Manager. So at the System Manager, on the status screen for the case controller, you'll find the address. And then under the Settings tab for the case controller, you'll be able to find the application being used, where it's referenced as a letter instead of a number. But that's just a 1-for-1, where A is equivalent to 1, B is equivalent to 2, etc. Once we have those two pieces of information, we'll want to go ahead and start to disconnect our terminal strips from the controller. We'll start with the power plug first, and then you can move on to the other terminal strips remaining on the case controller. So this makes it nice where we don't have to disconnect each wire individually and then re-land it. We'll be able to just go ahead and reconnect those same plugs on the new unit once the unit's in place. Once we've disconnected everything, we'll go ahead and install the new case controller in place of the old. So this is a good point to compare the part numbers on the two units, just to make sure that you're getting the like for like as far as the new case controller being exactly the same as what we have with the old unit. Once we do have that, we've confirmed that and we have the new case controller in place, however, we'll go ahead and just reverse the order of what we did with the old case controller and removing it. So we'll start by re-establishing or reconnecting all of our terminal strips, including power being the last one that we land. So they'll disconnect and reconnect along the top and bottom of the controller. And then once we have those in place, we'll go ahead and set our application and our address. So again, to do that, holding in the top button on the display, and then getting into the parameters that we mentioned, which again were 003 for the address and 061 for the application. When we get to those parameters, we'll just hit our set button. And from there, we can scroll up to the address we need, hit the set button again, and then move on to parameter 061. And from there, we'll be able to hit the set button and set the application. One other thing to point out is that you may have an optional communication card on the case controller, depending on the type of communication being used with the System Manager. If you do have that, you'll need to make sure you're either moving that over from the old controller to the new case controller, or if you have a new communication card, just make sure you're installing that with the unit. On the 550, for example, that would be found just below the display on a small cover. So you would remove the cover and put the communication card in there. And then for a model like the AKCC 210, it would be found at the back of the device at the top right corner where the communication card would be installed. Once those things are in place, then we'll want to go ahead and shift over to our System Manager to complete the rest of the programming from there. So back at the System Manager now, the first thing we'll want to do to bring the case controller online is a rescan. So from the main dashboard, if we go into the Configuration menu, and then into Network Nodes, you'll see the option to press for a complete rescan. So we'll just go ahead and select that option and hit yes. And then this can take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes, depending on the size of your network. Once that's completed, though, you can go to the Config Status tab. And from here, you'll see verification. You'll just want to find the address that you're working on, and you'll see verification whether that's online or offline. If it's offline, you'll have other communication issues you'll have to look into. But moving forward, assuming it did come online, the next step would be to download our set points into the unit. So to do that, if we go back under the configuration menu, I want to get under the control and refrigeration tabs, and you'll see your option for circuits here. So once we get into the setup for the circuit that we're working on, you may have to use the drop down to navigate to a different circuit. You may see a prompt here that asks you to retrieve configuration. If you do see that prompt, you want to make sure you say no to that. Saying yes to that would overwrite the pre-existing case settings with the factory defaults out of the new unit. But if we've said no to that, we then want to go to the download tab, and we will select the address of the unit we're working on, and then at the top of the screen, we'll press the download to selection. And that'll either come back with a pass or a fail message. If it's a fail, and you've checked off the other things we've mentioned earlier as far as the unit being online and the part number matching up, then that would be a situation where you need to get a hold of Danfoss for further help with troubleshooting. But assuming it does come back as a pass here under the total line, then we can go back over to setup. And from setup, the last step would just be to turn our main switch back from stop to start. This is just telling the case controller it's okay to start its regulation or its control conditions. So from here, you can go ahead and verify sensor readings on the status screen of the case, verify overall operation, and that should complete the setup of the new case controller. And that's how you would replace a case controller from our AdaptCool product line, specifically the models AKCC 210, 525, or 550A.
For more information on this topic, see the description below. And for more videos like this, visit our YouTube channel, Danfoss Cool US, and thank you for watching.